My wife brought her lover to our 15th wedding anniversary dinner. She walked into the restaurant arm in arm with a man I'd never meet expecting a romantic table for two. What she didn't expect was a private dining room full of her parents, our closest friends, and me, already seated, waiting. I stood up with a smile. "Melissa," I said, "I'm so glad you could join us. And Richard, too. Please, have a seat. I prepared something special for everyone tonight." She froze. Her smile cracked. Richard's eyes darted to the door. But it was too late. On that table, in a perfectly wrapped gift box, meant just for her, wasn't the diamond necklace I'd originally planned. It was every message she ever sent to him, printed, tabbed, annotated, with timestamps, alongside a notarized divorce agreement I'd already signed. "My name is James Wilson. I'm 42 years old, and I don't yell, I don't beg, and I don't lose my temper. But I do plan carefully. And when I strike back, I do it with silence, certainty, and a full room of witnesses. If your partner brought their affair partner to your anniversary dinner, what would you do?" Drop a 1 if you think James handled this with class. Or comment below with what you would have put in that gift box. And don't forget to subscribe because the rest of this story only gets colder. My name is James Wilson. I'm a 42-year-old software engineer living in Seattle. I've always been the quiet type. Not passive, just measured. I think things through. I don't explode. I don't threaten. I don't slam doors. I solve problems for a living and, as it turns out, in my marriage. Melissa and I met in college. She was bold, charming, the kind of woman who walked into a room and made the air feel different. I was the opposite. Quiet, observant, the guy in the back row who always submitted assignments 3 days early and never raised his voice in class. She liked that about me, or at least, she used to. We got married young, 27. The first few years were beautiful. Late-night takeout in our tiny apartment, weekend hikes when we could afford gas, lazy Sunday mornings in bed with coffee and bad TV. I thought we had something solid, and for a long time, we did. But somewhere along the way, the warmth began to fade. It was subtle at first missed dinner dates, muted reactions to surprises, conversations that used to last hours now boiled down to, and "we'll see." I chalked it up to stress. Melissa's job in marketing had become demanding. Long hours, big clients, constant travel. Meanwhile, I worked from home, managing back-end systems for a financial firm that didn't even know my name most days unless something crashed. We lived in the same house, but on different timelines. She'd walk in at 9 p.m., kiss me on the cheek, pour herself a glass of wine, and scroll through her phone while I finished cleaning up dinner. The silence was no longer comfortable. It was loaded. Still, I didn't question her. I believed in her. In us. I didn't believe in micromanaging. Not in code, not in marriage. People need space. That's what I kept telling myself. Until one night, about 6 months before our anniversary, her phone buzzed while she was in the shower. She never left it face up before. The message preview was from someone named R, just the initial. It read, "Same time tomorrow? I can't stop thinking about last night." My stomach didn't drop. My hands didn't shake. I just stared at the message and felt something settle. Something cold and steady, like a switch had been flipped. I put the phone back exactly where she left it. I didn't confront her. I didn't snoop further that night. Instead, I opened a clean text file on my laptop and titled it Plan. That was the night. Everything changed. Not because I learned she was cheating, but because I decided I wasn't going to react. I was going to respond. Over the next few days, I watched her closely. Not in a jealous, paranoid kind of way. No pacing, no checking behind her. Just observation. After all, I build systems for a living. And systems leave trails. She started staying late more often. Client crisis. Brainstorming meeting. Happy hour with the new interns. Always said with a kiss on the forehead. Always followed by the same perfume something expensive. Layered over something dishonest. I didn't question her. I just asked if she wanted me to save her dinner. She always said no. That's when I began syncing her phone to my private server. Nothing invasive, just standard backup protocols she'd agreed to when we set up our shared cloud years ago. I'd built it myself. Encrypted. Hidden. Safe. What I found there wasn't surprising. It was methodical. Text messages between her and Richard, a coworker from her company's Seattle office. They had been seeing each other for 6 months. Nothing rushed. They were careful. Private jokes. Coded language. Dates disguised as networking. Business trips with overlapping hotel stays. Even a shared folder of selfies they'd taken on their so-called strategy weekend. Richard, 39, creative director. Married with 2 kids and a golden retriever, according to his company profile and LinkedIn. His wife Claire ran a bakery downtown. I bookmarked her page. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. I kept collecting. Every week, I exported their threads. I organized them by date, screenshotted the photos, compiled metadata. I had location stamps, timestamps, backup audio from voice messages, even email threads they thought were clever by using work language to hide innuendo. It wasn't about catching her anymore. It was about timing. And what better timing than our 15th anniversary? A milestone, she called it in passing. Let's keep it low-key this year, she said, flipping through a magazine. Nothing fancy, just you and me, maybe sushi. But I already had a reservation. The same place I proposed to her. I'd booked it months in advance before I knew any of this. A rooftop restaurant overlooking the Sound, private room, candlelight, fixed course menu. I'd even ordered a custom gift box polished mahogany, velvet interior, her initials carved into the lid. It was meant to hold a necklace. Now it would hold the truth. I made a few changes to the reservation, added 2 seats, then 4 more. I invited her parents, our closest friends, the people she always said felt like family. They all thought it was a surprise anniversary party. In a way, it was. Meanwhile, I contacted my lawyer, quietly transferred all our joint assets into separate protection trusts. I closed the joint credit cards, disabled her access to the home equity account. I didn't drain anything, just rerouted, strategically, legally, irrevocably. Then I hired a private investigator. Not for more evidence, I had plenty, but to confirm Richard's marital status. He was still very much married. In fact, he and Claire had just posted family photos from a pumpkin patch 3 weeks ago. So I printed out copies of the texts, selected the ones with just the right balance of intimacy and cruelty, labeled them with dates, times, and locations, highlighted the ones where they joked about how clueless I was. I added the investigator's findings, the financial documents, the screenshots of shared hotel receipts, all printed and neatly arranged. It all went into the box. I even included a copy of the signed divorce agreement, already notarized. Melissa didn't suspect a thing. She thought I was distracted, working too much, distant. She didn't know I was designing an exit. One where I didn't have to shout, or beg, or collapse. One where every lie she told would echo in front of the very people who once toasted to our love. 2 days before our anniversary, she told me she was going to be late again. Client dinner, she said, slipping on heels too expensive for sushi. Won't be home before 10. I just nodded. Don't worry, I've got some work to catch up on anyway. She smiled, kissed me, and walked out the door with her coat still unbuttoned. That night, I drove by the restaurant where she claimed her meeting was. No reservation under her name, no dinner in progress. Just Richard's car parked outside a boutique hotel 2 blocks away. I didn't need to follow her in. I already knew. Instead, I drove home and opened the envelope from my lawyer. Inside was the final version of the divorce agreement. Property division, asset protection, and a custody clause if we ever had children. We didn't. Melissa had always said she wasn't ready. Now I understood why. The next day, I called Claire, Richard's wife. She was polite, a little confused at first. I introduced myself, told her I was calling not as a stranger, but as someone who believed she deserved to know the full story. There was silence on the other end. Then she whispered, "You're Melissa's husband?" "Yes," I said. And I think we both know this has been going on longer than we wanted to believe. I didn't send her everything, just enough to confirm what her gut had probably been screaming for months. Screenshots, hotel dates, a copy of the dinner invitation. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just said, "Thank you. I'm not doing this to hurt you," I added quietly, "but I thought you should be aware because I'm not planning to keep this private anymore." "I appreciate that," she said. "And I'll be there." I paused. "There?" Claire exhaled. "If you're going to expose them, I want to see it. I want to see her face." That was when I realized I wasn't alone in this anymore. Friday arrived. I spent the morning finishing the final details gifts for our guests, wine selection, the placement of the mahogany box. I even pressed the shirt Melissa once said made me look too serious. Funny how the same shirt felt like armor now. At 6:30 p.m., I arrived at the restaurant. The private room was ready. The candles were lit. The view was flawless, just like the night I proposed 15 years earlier. Melissa texted me at 6:45, running a few minutes behind. "Don't wait." I smiled. At 6:50, our guests began arriving. Her parents walked in first, full of smiles and confusion. My friends followed, surprised, but excited. I made polite small talk, served champagne. At 7:04, the door opened again. Melissa walked in wearing a red dress I hadn't seen in months, clutching Richard's arm like a prize. She stopped cold. Her smile collapsed the moment she saw the room, her mother gasping, her father's brow furrowed, the eyes of 10 witnesses turning from her to me, then back to Richard, like a silent wave of comprehension washing across the room. "James, what is this?" she asked, her voice catching. I stood up slowly. "I'm glad you brought Richard," I said, calm as ever. "I prepared gifts for everyone tonight." The room was dead silent. Richard tried to let go of her arm, but Melissa gripped him tighter. Her smile was frozen, her voice thin. "James, what's going on?" I didn't answer her directly. Instead, I turned to our guests and raised my glass. "Thank you all for being here tonight. 15 years sits a long time, full of lessons, sacrifices, surprises." I let that last word linger. Then I walked over to the head of the table and picked up the small, beautifully wrapped mahogany box. "This," I said, turning to Melissa, "was meant to hold something very different, but plans change." I handed it to her. She hesitated, still clinging to Richard like he could shield her from what was coming. "Open it," I said quietly. "Please." Her fingers trembled as she untied the ribbon. Inside, printed messages, neatly tabbed and labeled, emails, hotel receipts, photographs, and resting on Topper divorce agreement, already signed. She didn't move, didn't speak. Her hand stayed frozen in the box. But her mother gasped. Her father sat back hard in his chair, face drained of color. And Richard finally pulled away from her. "What the hell is this?" he asked, voice breaking. "You said your husband didn't know." "I didn't, James, please." Melissa turned to me, eyes wide now, tears forming. But I wasn't done. I turned to Claire, who had just stepped into the room. She walked calmly, confidently, and stood beside me without saying a word. "Melissa," I said. "Meet Claire, Richard's wife." Melissa staggered back like she'd been slapped. No, she wasn't supposed to." "You told him you were divorced," Claire cut in. Her voice was even surgical, just like he told me he was at a branding retreat. Then Claire turned to Richard. "Our kids asked where you were last weekend, by the way. I told them you were working late. Again." The tension in the room snapped like a tight wire. Gasps, shifts, forks placed gently on plates. The kind of silence that isn't empty but too full. Melissa tried to recover. "We didn't mean to, this wasn't." I raised a hand. "No more lying," I said, "not tonight." Then I faced the room. "I know this is uncomfortable, and I'm sorry for that. But for months, I've watched the woman I built a life with betray it piece by piece. She thought I was blind. She thought I was weak." I looked her straight in the eye. "I'm neither." Melissa's mother began to cry quietly. Her father stared straight ahead. I didn't bring you all here to shame her, I continued. I brought you here because I believe truth belongs in the light. I've already filed for divorce. All assets have been separated. The house, the accounts, the Carol handled. Melissa's eyes widened. What? How? 3 weeks ago, I said. You just didn't notice. She looked around the room as if searching for an escape hatch. There was none. I also sent all relevant documentation to HR at your company, Melissa, and to Richard's firm, because I figured if you two were proud enough to bring your affair to dinner, you might want your employers to know about the conferences you expense together. Richard cursed under his breath. Are you insane? I have clients. I have contracts. And now, I said, you also have a decision to make. Both of you. Claire stepped forward then, placing a slim folder on the table next to the box. Here's a summary of your company's affair policy, Richard. I highlighted the section on termination due to ethical violations. He looked at it like it might burn his hands. I suggest you read it. For a long moment, no one moved. Then I turned to the guests one last time. I want to thank you for coming. I know this wasn't the evening you expected, but I think it's the one we all needed. And with that, I nodded politely, took my coat, and walked out. No shouting. No vengeance speech. Just facts, witnesses, and silence. The kind of silence that follows after a carefully aimed truth finally lands. I didn't turn around when I walked out of that restaurant. Didn't need to. Behind me, I heard Melissa's voice crack as she begged her parents to listen. Heard Richard cursing under his breath, calling someone, maybe his lawyer, maybe his wife. But none of it was mine to carry anymore. I stepped into the night air. The cold didn't bite. It felt clean. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not from regret. From clarity. By morning, my phone buzzed with the first ripples. Melissa's mother had posted something vague and somber on Facebook. We never truly know people until we're forced to. Within an hour, her extended family started messaging me. Some offered sympathy. Some asked, "Is it true?" I didn't reply. By midday, Claire called. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. "You don't need to." "I do," she insisted. That night, I wasn't just watching her face. I was watching yours. And I've never seen someone so calm while everything burned. Sometimes, I said quietly, you have to let it burn. By the end of the week, Melissa was living in a hotel downtown. Her parents wouldn't take her in. Her name was removed from our shared lease. I kept the house. Not out of sentimentality, but because it was already mine, legally separated months ago. Her job? Terminated. Apparently, HR didn't find the idea of expensed romantic weekends charming, especially not when clients were involved. Richard. Fired too. But that wasn't the worst of it. Claire filed for divorce within 72 hours. She released screenshots, Anonymous Lawn, a local forum for professional women, of all places. Nothing vulgar, just honest. Evidence. Context. It spread. Quietly, efficiently. Like I'd hoped. By the time Richard's firm's quarterly meeting came around, his name was no longer on the agenda, nor on the website. Melissa tried to call me twice. I didn't answer. The third time, she left a voicemail. "You humiliated me," she said, her voice barely holding together. "You think you won? You think people will remember what you did as noble? They won't. You'll just be the guy who destroyed his wife in public. Congratulations." I deleted it. Then I blocked her number. Weeks passed. One by one, friends we used to see as ours quietly drifted toward me. They didn't say much, but their silence toward hers said enough. I ran into one of them, Banat, a bookstore. He clapped me on the shoulder. "That night, man, you didn't flinch." I shrugged. I wasn't angry, I said. Just done. Eventually, I took a short trip. Portland. Rented a small Airbnb near the river. Breathed fresh air. Spent the mornings walking nowhere in particular. Afternoons reading. Evenings cooking in silence. It was beautiful. Not the city. The peace. That's when I realized I didn't need revenge. What I needed was space. Clean separation. No more gaslighting, no more manipulation wrapped in makeup and red dresses. Just a life that felt like mine again. 3 months later, I relocated permanently. Started consulting full-time. Built a quiet routine. Bought a plant. Named it Nelson. Didn't think too hard about why. Then one Sunday, while walking through a bookstore downtown, I met someone. Emily. She asked if I'd read the book I was holding. I said no. She smiled and said, "Don't. The ending's awful." We talked for 20 minutes without noticing the time pass. I didn't tell her everything. Not yet. I wasn't ready to explain the weight of what I'd walked through. But I did tell her this. I believe in loyalty, and that love, if it's real, never needs to be hidden. She smiled. So do I. 6 months later, I barely recognized the man I used to be. The tightness in my chest, the quiet dread of coming home to someone who stopped choosing me was gone. In its place, silence. But the good kind. The kind that comes when nothing's being hidden anymore. Melissa and I never spoke again. The divorce was finalized quietly. No court battles, no public statements, just signatures and silence. Last I heard, she was renting a small apartment in Tacoma, working freelance, trying to rebrand her life. She could have kept the necklace I once planned to give her, but she never saw it. I'd tucked it into a drawer the night I discovered the affair. I gave it to Claire instead, anonymously. No note, just the velvet box and a card that read, "You deserved the truth." As for Muel, I didn't fall in love right away. I didn't need to. I fell in peace first. And peace, when you've been starved of it for years, feels a lot like love. Emily and I still talk, still walk bookstores, still ask too many questions over coffee that goes cold because conversation runs too long. And every time I look at her, I don't wonder if she's hiding something. I just listen to the silence between yous and know it's clean. What did I learn? That not every war needs to be loud. That sometimes the most powerful revenge is giving someone exactly what they asked for and walking away with everything they didn't expect you to keep. Dignity, proof, and peace. What did you think of this story? If you were in James's shoes, how would you have handled it? Let me know in the comments below. And if you believe in quiet justice, vote 3. Share your story or reaction in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to Revenge with Max for more true stories every single day.